Welcome to another episode of Bugs, Drugs, and Genomes. This is Ella, and I'm so glad to be back for another episode of the podcast as we dive into another fascinating aspect of AMR, global health, and capacity strengthening. Today, we're diving into the world of One Health, the idea that human, animal, and environmental health are all connected. I'm joined today by Dafni, a microbiologist at the GLOCAB Research Group at DTU Food, and we'll be exploring big questions like how One Health links to AMR, the real-world applications of One Health, and why solving these problems really takes a team. So let's get into it. Before we dive into One Health, could you briefly introduce yourself and your background and the work you do with the GLOCAB Group?
Hi, Ella. Yes, and thank you so much for having me. So my name is Dafni. I'm both an engineer and microbiologist, but then switched to public health microbiology. I've been going around a bit, different countries, Finland, then working for the World Health Organization, and I have now landed myself back in Denmark at the GLOCAB Group, where I work with antimicrobial resistance and capacity building for laboratories across the world.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, and thanks for being here today. So let's kick off by explaining for listeners that maybe aren't familiar with the concept. Can you explain what One Health means?
So it came into focus because we increasingly understood that human health cannot be viewed outside of the context of also animal health and the environment that we share. So basically, it's a holistic approach that is based on the premise that people, animals, plants, and the surrounding environment are all interlinked. And based on WHO, the aim of One Health is to sustainably balance and optimize the health of people, animals, and ecosystems.
That's so interesting. So it's kind of considering everything in relation to one another. But why is this relevant now? Is this a new concept?
So, well, yes and no. So, of course, it's something that is easily understood, right? That all these are linked. But you would be surprised to hear how much this is actually not applied and how much in each country, in many countries, authorities work in silo kind of ways. So the public health agencies, veterinary agencies, and environmental agencies do not collaborate or exchange data between one another. So, of course, as it has become increasingly more important, countries change that approach and have new frameworks. And it is increasingly more important as well because now human actions have put us closer to animals and the environment, be it through deforestation, be it through increased trade, but of course also climate change. So this is something that also worldwide, the World Health Organization has been trying to promote, that countries have committees and action plans that are focused around this One Health concept. Mm-hmm. And collaborate more.
Yeah. It sounds like it requires a lot of collaboration between sectors. Could you give us some examples of like One Health in practice?
So, of course, a main thing to think about is zoonotic diseases, so diseases that come from animals. And I think we are all only too well aware of COVID-19 and how that began, and for example, the monitoring and surveillance of bats in terms of COVID-19, other respiratory viruses, and influenza. So, of course, animals in this context can be reservoirs of dangerous pathogens, viruses that have, for example, epidemic and pandemic potential. And this exactly shows that if we want to have prevention, proper surveillance, and also take control measures properly, we need to consider everything. Oftentimes when we have, for example, an outbreak coming up, we can first see diseased animals. And then if we detect this in time, we can take appropriate measures to prevent it.
And then going back to your work in the GLOCAB group, do you use One Health or One Health concepts at work or in antimicrobial resistance?
So if we look at the environment, for example, environmental microbes are a reservoir of antimicrobial resistance genes, also of antibiotics, that then can circle back to humans. On top of that, we know that in animal food production, such as pig production in Denmark, for example, they use a lot of antibiotics to prevent diseases, but then that gives rise to antimicrobial resistance, and then it can come back to us when we consume those food sources.
So, Dafni, what do you think the biggest challenge in implementing One Health approaches is today?
So, of course, there are like methodological issues, how to standardize and exchange information between the disciplines. But of course, it's also structural issues. For example, different authority stakeholders may not wish to collaborate as much. But also, I would say we are in this era where increasingly maybe we do not recognize the impact of our actions. If we don't accept that with climate change, we change the environment and it comes back to ourselves, how are we going to be motivated to take action on that? So I think there are many challenges on many levels, but the first step is to understand the concept and to embrace it in our everyday work.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dafni, for your insights and for that fascinating deep dive into One Health. It's super eye-opening to see how everything is connected in such a complicated and fragile way. We are just about ready to wrap up this episode, but before we go, I have a quick quiz, as always, for our lovely listeners. So today's question is, Denmark is one of the world's largest exporters of pork. Why is antibiotic use in pigs monitored so carefully? Is it A, to make the meat taste better, B, to prevent the spread of antimicrobial resistant genes to humans, C, to help pigs grow faster, or D, because it's trendy in farming? And the answer is B. AMR can spread from animals to humans through food, water, and the environment. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Bugs, Drugs, and Genomes. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes where we continue to delve into our research group's work, AMR policy and practice, and interesting career insights. Don't miss it. We'll see you next time.